Yours for questions.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I want to start out telling a little story. A few years ago, I was invited down to Milwaukee to visit and learn about a program called the ACTS housing program. It started by a Catholic priest, and basically this Catholic priest was taking advantage of a number of foreclosures on very well-constructed homes in the early 1900s that had fallen into disrepair and were under foreclosure. And he was able to buy these homes for a few $1,000s. And then with the help of private lenders, some Wisconsin banks, individuals that were renting, low-income individuals renting, paying too high rent, were able to borrow $15,000 to $30,000, put in their sweat equity, and own a home, and literally cut their rental payments in half or more. And it was a great program. I toured a number of homes. The homeowners did a great job of repairing these homes on a shoestring. But one of the main reasons the priest invited me down was to complain about the impact of the low-income housing tax credit on his program. What was happening is contractors were using that low-income housing tax credit. They were snatching up all those homes in foreclosure, putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into those well-constructed homes, and pretty well taking the opportunity away from lower-income individuals. So again, that was a well-intended program, federal government program, impacting a private sector program and disadvantaging low-income individuals. So I just had to kind of tell that. My questions really have to do with a functioning market. Generally, supply will meet demand, particularly when demand is boosted by $100 billion plus of federal government funding. I'll start with you, Dr. Walker, and this is a general question for everybody. Why isn't supply meeting demand? What is causing it? Obviously, inflation is a huge problem, affecting interest rates, causing costs. But go ahead, Dr. Walker.
So I think, based upon the expert testimony, we'll agree that housing affordability is important. I hear a lot of supply constraints. So on the supply side, if it's the supply side and supply constraints are the problem, then some of the policy proposals that are on the demand side, like vouchers, would make the problem even worse. It gets back to your example of an unintended consequence, right? So if you have a demand side solution to a supply side constraint, then you're going to have an increase in home prices, which will make matters worse, or you're going to displace people who don't have access to the voucher. That's going to lead to a race to the bottom where people are going to try to get just below the point where they can access the voucher. Why supply is so constrained, I think there's regulatory issues that could be addressed. Mr. Slover probably has more information about those, but I just wanted to briefly mention, again, based upon your example, there are unintended consequences of a lot of these policies. And I think when you have a supply side issue and you address it with a demand side policy, you have unintended consequences that could be much worse.
I'd like a little more detail on that. Again, I want to just throw out a couple things. Rent controls, obviously keep down the supply because it's just not worth investing in things. Obviously, high interest rates drive up the cost. Over-regulation. Mr. Slover, and apologize for mispronouncing your name in the opening statement, but can you enlighten us on this?
To sort of build on what Dr. Walker was saying, I think one of the unintended consequences of some government programs, I think it's sort of an idea versus execution, which is a way I like to simplify things sometimes. In Washington, D.C., as an example, the D.C. Housing Authority Board approved a rent payment standard of 187% of what HUD thinks fair market rent is. So now the D.C. Housing Authority has 12 to 15,000 rents that they're willing to pay, upwards of 187% of what HUD thinks is the fair market rent. What that does is floods the market with people with payments that are above what the market is. And that puts pressure on the rest of the market because now you have someone overpaying significantly for units, which pushes up prices lower and also creates an industry where people actually go out and purchase organically existing low-income housing and remove those residents and backfill it with higher paying vouchers. It's an entire business model out there where people promote a business plan which says the arbitrage to government funded subsidies is my business plan. I'm going to buy a building at a cap rate of X. I'm going to empty it out, and I'm going to fill it back in, and my cap rate's going to double because the rent doubled. And that's an unintended consequence.
And that's really exactly what happened in Milwaukee, similar to that, with the low-income housing tax credit. I guess for the majority witnesses, I'd only say, you know, all you're asking for is more and more federal government spending, and I understand that. Some of it's appropriate, but when we have this massive amount of deficit spending, which is the cause of the inflation, which drives up the interest rates, which drives up the cost of housing, I mean, it's just a self-perpetuating problem. It's not the solution. It's part of the root cause. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kane.